Respect is not something you can demand through endless sacrifices, nor is it a gift given freely to those who bend themselves out of shape to satisfy others. Respect is born from authenticity, from the courage to exist as you truly are, rather than as others wish you to be. The great tragedy of so many lives is that people confuse love with submission, kindness with servitude, and respect with approval. In doing so, they live not as individuals but as reflections of the expectations of others. And in that reflection, their true self is lost. If you want respect, you must abandon the compulsion to please, for nothing destroys the soul faster than the constant denial of one's own truth. Every time you sacrifice your truth in order to be accepted, you wound yourself in ways that are not immediately visible, but which over time become unbearable. To please others may seem harmless at first. It may feel like a gesture of kindness, a way to maintain peace, or even a way to protect relationships. But when it becomes a pattern, when it becomes the foundation of your existence, it is no longer kindness but self-erasure. To betray yourself for the comfort of another is to teach your soul that it does not matter, that its needs, its voice, its essence, can be silenced in exchange for temporary approval. Yet the unconscious does not forget such betrayals. It records them, accumulates them, and transforms them into symptoms that will eventually surface as anxiety, depression, anger, or a profound emptiness. The paradox is that those who dedicate their lives to pleasing others often believe they are preserving relationships, but in reality they are hollowing them out. For how can a relationship built upon lies, upon the constant suppression of one's feelings, upon the refusal to be authentic, ever be strong? A bond cannot thrive if one of the participants is absent, if one has replaced authenticity with performance. Such relationships are not founded on truth, but on illusion, and illusions eventually collapse. The world respects not the one who bends, but the one who stands. Consider the figures of history who command reverence long after their deaths. Were they those who sought desperately to please? Or were they those who dared to stand in their own truth even when the cost was rejection? The act of pleasing enslaves you to the opinions of others, but the act of authenticity frees you, even when it earns you enemies. Respect cannot be begged for. It is won by the courage to remain intact, to say no when no is true, and to speak your needs even when silence would be easier. Self-betrayal is also a betrayal of potential. Every time you suppress your own desire to accommodate another, you amputate a part of your future. Your dreams, your ambitions, your natural inclinations cannot flourish in an environment where they are constantly sacrificed for approval. You become a ghost of yourself, alive but not living, present but absent from your own story, and no one respects a ghost because a ghost does not claim its own space in the world. The cost of pleasing is not only internal but external. People sense when you betray yourself for them. They may accept it, they may even exploit it, but they will not respect it. Because respect is born from strength, and strength requires the courage to stand firm in who you are. To betray yourself is to choose weakness, and weakness never earns genuine respect. It only earns temporary tolerance, often accompanied by quiet contempt. Thus, the act of pleasing others at the expense of yourself is not kindness but self-destruction. The one who seeks respect must first turn inward and confront the places where they have betrayed themselves. For until you stop silencing your truth, until you stop making yourself smaller for the comfort of others, respect will always remain out of reach. It begins not with the approval of others, but with the refusal to betray your own soul. When you devote your life to pleasing others, you imprison yourself within invisible chains, and the weight of those chains grows heavier with every concession. You may think that compliance buys peace, that silence avoids conflict, that saying yes when you want to say no preserves relationships, but in truth, each act of self-denial erodes your spirit. You become trapped in a cycle where your worth is measured not by your essence, but by your usefulness to others. And once people sense that your boundary is weak, they begin, whether consciously or unconsciously, to test it, to push it, to consume what you will not protect. In this way, the habit of pleasing does not create harmony, it breeds exploitation. Exploitation does not always come in the form of cruelty. Sometimes it arrives softly, disguised as dependency, as expectations, as subtle pressures that pull you into roles you never agreed to play. But make no mistake, whenever your silence is used against you, whenever your kindness is taken as weakness, you are being consumed. The world does not respect the one who is endlessly pliable. It respects the one who, while capable of kindness, knows when to say enough. Without boundaries, you do not give others a chance to respect you, for they see not a whole being but a vessel to be filled with their own desires. The unconscious plays a cruel role in this cycle. Every time you suppress your true feelings, every time you permit someone to cross a line without resistance, your unconscious takes note. It knows you are complicit in your own diminishment, and so it responds with feelings of anger, resentment, or despair. These emotions, unexpressed, build within until they eventually burst forth in destructive ways. You may find yourself lashing out at those closest to you, resenting the very people you once tried so hard to please. What began as an effort to preserve peace ultimately creates deeper conflict, because unacknowledged truth has a way of forcing itself to the surface. To set boundaries is not an act of selfishness, but of self-preservation. It is the declaration that your existence has value, that your time, your energy, your emotions are not infinite resources to be drained by anyone who demands them. Boundaries are the architecture of respect. They draw the line between generosity and exploitation, between compassion and submission. Without them, you cannot build healthy relationships, because respect cannot flourish in a space where one person is always diminished to elevate another. The truth is that exploitation thrives only when permission is granted, and the most dangerous form of permission is silent compliance. When you allow disrespect without consequence, you are not just harmed by others, you are harmed by your own refusal to protect yourself. Boundaries, then, are not walls that isolate you, but gates that ensure the right people are allowed close, while those who exploit are kept at a distance. To master the art of boundaries is to master the art of dignity. The pursuit of approval may appear harmless, even noble, but beneath its surface lies a deep betrayal of the self. When your sense of worth depends on the nods and smiles of others, you become a mirror rather than a being. You reflect what is expected, not who you are. Approval becomes the currency by which you trade your authenticity, and soon you no longer know where the mask ends and where your true face begins. Every compliment, every affirmation feels like sustenance, but it is a nourishment that leaves you hungry, because it feeds only the surface of your being while starving the depths. What is worse, those who sense your need for validation can wield it as power over you, granting or withholding it to shape you according to their desires. The psyche cannot tolerate such self-betrayal without consequence. When you constantly bend yourself to fit the expectations of others, your unconscious grows restless, for it knows you are living inauthentically. It begins to rebel, not with words but with symptoms: anxiety, emptiness, anger, depression. These are the signals that you have abandoned your inner compass in favor of the collective's fleeting approval. And in time, you may come to feel alien to yourself, for every action you take is shaped by the gaze of others rather than the voice within. The soul suffers when it is denied its own truth, and the suffering is relentless until you listen. The paradox is that the more you seek approval, the less respect you gain. People admire strength, not submission. They follow those who walk their own path, not those who mold themselves to fit the crowd. When you strive to please everyone, you dilute yourself until nothing remains but a hollow shell. The stronger your need for approval, the more invisible you become, because others sense that you will never challenge them, never stand firm, never risk disapproval by asserting your truth. Respect does not grow in such soil, it withers. What you must come to realize is that approval is never stable, never lasting. Today it is given, tomorrow it is withdrawn. If you anchor your identity to it, you will drift endlessly, carried by the shifting winds of opinion. To live this way is to be at the mercy of forces outside yourself, never secure, never grounded. But when you turn inward and root your worth in the core of your being, you no longer tremble at the thought of disapproval. You see it for what it is, someone else's perception, fleeting, subjective, unable to define your essence. Only by releasing the need for approval can you find freedom. For freedom is not found in being praised. It is found in living truthfully, even if others frown upon it. When you no longer need their validation, you are finally able to act from authenticity, and in that authenticity lies the only respect worth having, the respect that comes from yourself. Respect is not earned through appeasement, but through the silent demonstration of inner strength. The world is not moved by those who bend at every breeze of opinion. It is drawn to those who stand firm, rooted in something deeper than the shifting judgments of others. People instinctively sense the difference between a person who acts from conviction and one who acts from fear of rejection. The former commands respect without asking for it, while the latter spends a lifetime begging for scraps of acknowledgement that never satisfy. Strength of character radiates without words, and it is this unspoken power that silences the contempt of others. To possess this strength, you must first confront the parts of yourself that tremble before disapproval. Fear of rejection is nothing more than the echo of childhood wounds, of moments when love seemed conditional and acceptance had to be earned. If these shadows remain unexamined, you will carry them into every relationship, every decision, making choices that are not truly yours. But when you face them directly, when you recognize that your worth has never depended on the applause of others, you begin to cultivate an inner authority that no one can strip away. It is from this authority that respect grows, for people cannot help but recognize when a person governs themselves rather than being governed by the crowd. Consider how often respect is confused with likability. Many believe that to be liked is to be respected, but this is an illusion. One may be liked for being agreeable, for smoothing over conflict, for never disrupting the comfort of others. But such liking is shallow, and it vanishes the moment you no longer serve another's convenience. True respect arises not when you make yourself small to fit others, but when you expand fully into your being, even if it provokes discomfort. To embody truth is to risk offense, yet it is precisely this risk that establishes you as someone who cannot be dismissed. Strength does not mean aggression or domination. It means a quiet, unshakable alignment with who you are. It is the refusal to betray your principles, even when silence or compliance would bring temporary ease. It is the courage to say no when yes would be easier, to walk away when staying would mean self-betrayal, to hold your ground when compromise would hollow you out. This kind of strength unsettles those who thrive on manipulation, because it renders them powerless against you. And paradoxically, the very people who once sought to diminish you will begin to respect you, for they cannot help but recognize power when it is present. Respect, then, is not a prize given by others. It is the natural consequence of embodying your truth. The more you stand firm in yourself, the less you will crave external validation, and the more others will respond to the undeniable aura of authenticity. For respect is not something you demand, it is something you become. When you live your life as a constant pleaser, you unwittingly chain yourself to the moods, desires, and expectations of others. Your worth becomes a currency traded for temporary approval, and in this endless transaction, you lose the very essence of yourself. Dependence on validation is a subtle form of slavery. for it places your freedom, your dignity, and your sense of identity in the hands of those who may neither understand you nor care for your truth. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you silence your voice to avoid conflict, you hand over a fragment of your soul, until one day you no longer recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror. This dependence breeds anxiety because the ground you stand on is never stable. It shifts with the whims of others. Today you are praised, tomorrow you are ridiculed, and in both cases you remain a prisoner of their gaze. Carl Jung taught us that what is unconscious will rule our lives as fate. If you do not make conscious the hidden hunger that drives your need for approval, you will remain enslaved to it. At the root of this hunger often lies a forgotten wound, a child who felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy unless they performed according to the standards of others. This wound festers in the adult who cannot say no, who cannot risk disapproval, who bends until they break. To heal is to see the wound clearly, to acknowledge its existence without shame, and to recognize that you are no longer that helpless child. You have within you the capacity to grant yourself the validation you so desperately sought from others. Dependence on approval also distorts relationships, for they cease to be built on authenticity and become built on performance. The pleaser does not love truly, because their love is tied to fear of rejection. They do not speak honestly, because honesty risks abandonment. Instead, they project an image designed to maintain harmony, an image that betrays the living reality of their soul. But no relationship can thrive on masks. Eventually, resentment seeps in, for the soul knows when it has been silenced too long. The very people you try to please may begin to sense your inauthenticity, and their respect withers, leaving you empty and bitter. Freedom begins the moment you break this dependence. To do so requires courage, for it means enduring disapproval without crumbling. It means realizing that rejection does not destroy you. It liberates you from those who were never aligned with your truth. It means choosing solitude over false connection, truth over performance, authenticity over comfort. This transformation is not easy, for the habit of pleasing runs deep, but each act of honesty strengthens your independence. Each refusal to betray yourself builds the foundation of genuine self-respect. And with that self-respect comes the only form of respect worth having, the kind that flows naturally from others when they encounter someone who cannot be bought by their praise or broken by their disapproval. Respect is not demanded through desperation nor secured through endless sacrifice. It is commanded by the quiet authority of self-respect. When you carry yourself with dignity, when you honor your own values above the whims of others, people sense an invisible boundary around you. This boundary is not spoken but felt, and it tells the world, here is someone who cannot be manipulated, someone who cannot be bent for cheap approval. That invisible force is what creates respect, far more than words or gestures ever could. If you want to be respected, you must first cultivate the ability to stand firmly within yourself, to trust your own instincts even when they conflict with the desires of others. Respect begins within, and without that foundation, no external validation will ever last. The danger of seeking respect outside yourself is that it becomes conditional. Others grant it when you conform and withdraw it when you deviate. But when respect is rooted in self-knowledge, it is unshakable, for it does not depend on applause. Carl Jung would remind us that the psyche requires balance between the inner and outer world. If all your worth is tied to external recognition, then you will forever live in imbalance, tossed between approval and rejection like a leaf in the wind. To anchor yourself, you must ask, what values are so essential to me that I would rather be disliked than betray them? In answering this, you form the bedrock of true respect. Self-respect is not arrogance, though the world often confuses the two. Arrogance is inflated insecurity, a mask hiding fragility, but self-respect is the quiet certainty that your soul has value regardless of opinion. It is the refusal to lower your standards simply to be accepted. It is the strength to walk away from relationships, jobs, and environments that demand your silence in exchange for belonging. It is the inner voice that says, "I am enough as I am, and I will not contort myself to prove it." People may resist this at first, for those who benefited from your compliance will resent your independence. But over time, even they will recognize the power of someone who cannot be controlled. The paradox is that the less you chase respect, the more it comes to you. When you no longer beg for it, you radiate the confidence that naturally earns it. When you no longer fear rejection, you command admiration even from those who disagree with you. For respect is not about being liked. It is about being seen as someone unshaken by the tides of approval. Every time you choose authenticity over compliance, you carve deeper into your being the kind of authority that cannot be fabricated. Respect is the echo of your inner stance reverberating outward. It is not a gift others can truly give you, but a recognition of what you already hold within. To master respect, you must master yourself first, and only then will others mirror back the dignity you embody. The final step in freeing yourself from the endless cycle of disrespect is to embrace the inevitability of conflict and rejection as the cost of living authentically. Too many people imagine that respect can be achieved while still maintaining universal approval. But this is a fantasy. Respect and approval are not the same. In fact, they are often opposites. Those who respect you may not always like you, and those who like you may not always respect you. If you live your life trying to be agreeable to everyone, you will sacrifice respect for comfort, and in doing so, you will become invisible to yourself. The human psyche, Jung reminds us, thrives on individuation, the process of becoming whole and unique. But individuation cannot happen in the shadows of others' expectations. It requires stepping into the light, even when that light reveals truths that others find inconvenient, unsettling, or even offensive. When you stop pleasing others, you inevitably disappoint some people. They may accuse you of selfishness, of arrogance, of cruelty. This is the reflex of those who are threatened by your refusal to play by their rules. Yet it is precisely here, in the willingness to bear such accusations without retreating, that true respect is forged. Respect is not born in harmony but in tension. It is in the clash of boundaries, the refusal to submit, that people begin to realize your worth. Even if they resent you, they know you cannot be easily dismissed, and deep down, even in their frustration, they sense a strength they themselves lack. The fear of rejection is what chains most people to a life of submission. They would rather be tolerated than respected, rather be used than risk solitude. But solitude is not a curse. It is the crucible in which dignity is born. When you are unafraid of being alone, you are free. You no longer negotiate your value with others because you know it is not theirs to grant. This is why the man or woman who can endure solitude becomes unshakable. They can walk away from anything or anyone that compromises their integrity. And paradoxically, those who are unafraid of rejection become the ones who are most respected, because their worth is clearly not for sale. Every act of self-betrayal to please others leaves a wound in the soul. It whispers to you in moments of silence, reminding you that you surrendered your voice for the illusion of safety. Over time, these wounds accumulate and transform into bitterness, resentment, and quiet despair. But when you choose authenticity over compliance, even in the face of conflict, you avoid this slow death of the spirit. You preserve your vitality, your dignity, your inner flame. This is why respect must be prioritized over approval. Because approval fades the moment you stop performing, but respect endures as long as you remain true to yourself. Respect, then, is not about controlling others' perceptions, but about refusing to betray your own essence. It is not about keeping everyone satisfied, but about standing so firmly in who you are that others cannot help but acknowledge your strength. To seek respect, you must embrace the inevitability of rejection and the reality of conflict. For only in standing firm against resistance does the soul discover its unshakable core. and only there does true respect begin.